Get the whole Young Turks 3-hour show by going to theyoungturks.com. If you become a member, you get the whole show, plus a very fun post-game show as well. See you then.
You go chasing rabbits.
Well, the Young Turks, interesting show ahead for you guys. I'm excited about, of course, a lot of things. But most of all, we're going to get Simon Johnson on today, former chief economist at the IMF and current professor at MIT, and one of the guys who understands the need for financial reform better than almost anyone else in the country. And he's talked about the intellectual capture and otherwise economic capture, etc., of the United States government by some of the largest banks and richest people in the country. And he says it reminds him of his days at the IMF when countries like Russia would be captured, the government would be captured by oligopolies and the people who run them. So it's a fascinating discussion. That's going to happen a little later in the program. Now, we have stories about the madness of Republicans today. Of course. I mean, what's the three themes, right? Madness of Republicans, the sellout of Democrats. That's also happening today. Trust me, coming up very soon. Okay, over and over again, and the total uselessness of the media. I don't know if we're doing that today, but we'll see if we get to it. Okay. All right. So let's start with a new controversy. We have the N-word. Everybody knows what that is, and then we added the F word to that, and some people are still confused about that because they're like, what, you mean the F with the thing and the sex? No, the F referring to gays, right? So no, that's out. Okay, so that's the F word. And apparently we're adding a new thing to our lexicon now, the R word. The R word cannot be said. Anybody know what it is? Anybody? JR, can you take a guess? R as in ridiculous? No, of course not. Nothing, right? Okay, I'm going to say it for the last time now, only for the purpose of edification, because I don't think anyone knows what it is. And then from then on, I will be banned from saying it as part of political correctness. Retarded. Okay? The word is retarded. Okay, it is not, that's it. Officially banned. From now on, we denounce and reject anyone who uses it. Why is this a controversy now? Because Rahm Emanuel used it as a slur against liberals. Now, mind you, Rahm Emanuel is supposed to be liberal. In fact, he's the chief of staff to President Obama, who Fox News calls every day a socialist, Marxist, Maoist, uber-left progressive, right? The reality is, of course, is that Rahm Emanuel is nowhere near liberal. In fact, he called liberals in a meeting effing retarded. Okay. All right. Already we have a violation. I denounce and reject myself. Okay. I meant the R word. So, who's all over him for this, and why is he in trouble? Because I was all over him for this, and Wall Street Journal even wrote an article about it, saying, Rahm Emanuel does not represent progressive interests, etc. But why is he in actual trouble? Because progressives in this country can't get anybody in trouble, can't get anybody's attention. Nobody pays attention to them. So, no, it's Sarah Palin. She's on the warpath. And she says that he is being unbelievably insensitive, indecent, and should immediately be fired. So every media organization in the country has written a story about it today. No matter where I went, I turned CBS News, Sarah Palin story, Associated Press, Yahoo, wherever you go, that's it. Okay, so let me read you a part of her statement. Of course, she writes it on Facebook. Look, she's all new media. I can respect that. I'm always a little amused by it. Grown-ass politicians do that, but that's all right. God bless. I'm in favor. She says, are you capable of decency, Rahm Emanuel? Quote, just as we'd be appalled if any public figure of Rahm's stature ever used the N-word or other such inappropriate language. Rahm's slur on all God's children with cognitive and development disabilities and the people who love them is unacceptable, and it's heartbreaking. Can I say that statement is the R word? Or that's... No, now, the slur was used against us, okay? I mean, he almost specifically meant liberals who are attacking him. Me, okay? Now, do I think Rahm Emanuel hates children with Down syndrome, and he was obviously trying to use a slur against them, or, somehow reference us? Now, he was just calling us stupid. If you say that word is offensive and let's not use it anymore, okay, all right. Obviously some people are greatly offended by it. I get it, and look, that's an interesting conversation, okay? But you're not going to fire Rahm Emanuel over that. That's crazy. That's nonsense, okay? So nobody even knew until yesterday that word was illegal, okay? Or that word was unacceptable. Now, that's not fair. Some people have been on the warpath against that word, saying it's a bad word and shouldn't be used, okay? But was it a firing offense for anybody who used it? I think that's going to be news to a lot of Americans. I mean, Sarah Palin is so stupid. Can I use that word? Can I use the S word? Or is that an offense against all of God's children who are a little deficient in the mental categories? Okay, she's so stupid that she's made me defend Rahm Emanuel. Okay, I don't like Rahm Emanuel. I don't like any part of Rahm Emanuel. But this is absurd. So, and wouldn't it be ironic if this is why Rahm Emanuel got fired? Not for selling out the corporate America, not for selling out health insurance, not for political bungling and losing Kennedy's seat when he's supposed to be a political genius, not for not getting health care reform passed at all, not for any of those substantive stuff. But Sarah Palin was offended because he used the R word. He's a goner. But you know what? I wouldn't be surprised, because the progressives will apparently never be listened to in the country, but conservatives, I mean, any absurd claim, it doesn't matter. And everybody has to stop what they're doing and listen and cave in. And, of course, Democrats eventually cave in, crumble to them. So maybe I should thank Sarah Palin. I should thank her for the favor she's doing us. Getting rid of Rahm Emanuel might be a great blessing in disguise. Well, it's not even in disguise. It's very obvious to me. By the way, at the end of the Yahoo story on it, they say, Rahm Emanuel is, and this was in all the stories, this first part, has apologized to, you got to find someone to apologize to, right? When you use the N-word, you go apologize to the head of the NAACP and randomly Al Sharpton, right? Because he's in the press a lot. So who do you apologize to if you use the R word? God, I love political correctness. I find it so amusing. And the ironic thing is people accuse us of political correctness. You kidding me, man? You watch this show? All right. Apparently, you were supposed to apologize to Special Olympics Chairman, CEO Tim Shriver. He is now the guru and the end-all, be-all decider of who can and cannot use the R word and whether they should be fired. So Rahm Emanuel, hat in hand, went to him and, of course, apologized profusely. And the apology apparently was accepted. You are pardoned. Okay. But at the end of the Yahoo article, they said, ironically, the one group that Rahm Emanuel did not apologize to and says he will never apologize to is the people he called the R word, liberals. So liberal groups fighting for progressive priorities. You think you're going to apologize? Shut up! I'm busy kowtowing to Sarah Palin and randomly the CEO of the Special Olympics. You know your place. You know what you are. You're the R word. Oh, by the way, political genius Rahm Emanuel, who's now going around apologizing to half the people in the world, what happened? I thought we were the R word. I thought you were the really smart one. How'd you get yourself in trouble like this? Weird. Maybe not a political genius after all. I'm going to have to put some thought behind that. All right, so that's the nonsense Sarah Palin story of the day. Now let me give you a little bit of substance, okay? Let me get worked up. All right, let's roll up the sleeves. So, I've been in a bit of a controversy today with Senator Dodd's office. Okay, I wrote a blog this morning talking about how bipartisanship is a fraud, a scam, political cover for the Democrats to sell out to corporate America. If you watch this show, you've heard me talk about that a lot. I wrote about it, and I said, I think the main takeaway from that article, and what's a little more new than, or newer than what I've been talking about in the past is, and I've said it before, but I want to emphasize it today, which is, look, why has there never been calls for bipartisanship when the Republicans are in charge. Not never, but very rarely. And certainly the Republicans don't give a damn, right? So when Bush and Cheney were in charge, nobody talked about bipartisanship. You talked about kicking Democratic ass and shoving things down their throats, right? Was there like a big call? Oh, we're going to have tax cuts. Oh, we don't want to filibuster. Let's get bipartisan. You put Democrats, please, 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 we vote for tax cuts. No, they said shut the hell up and take the tax cuts and put them wherever the hell you like in your body part, okay? But they're coming, whether you like it or not. No talk of bipartisanship. Now, why? All of a sudden, the Democrats switch over, bipartisan, 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 bipartisan. What happened? What changed, right? Now, one could make the argument that the Democrats are nicer or more reasonable or more moderate. One could make that argument if they were politically naive. Okay, here's the reality. The Republicans don't need political cover. Everybody knows they're for the rich and the powerful, okay? That's how they, that's their go-to move. They collect money from the rich and the powerful, and then they turn around. And look, don't get me wrong. Of course, they try to trick the people who vote for them by saying, "Oh, we're for freedom and liberty. Yeah, we're on your side." But I mean, so it's an obvious fraud. Everybody knows it, right? Anyone who's paying attention, the 33% who vote for them, no matter what, all you have to say is the magic word, God. Oh, God's on the Republican side. Okay, which banker do you need me to subsidize, right? So that game is obvious. Now, the Democrats, though, they got a problem. The problem is they pretend to be on our side, right? But by us, I don't mean liberals or progressives. I mean the people. They pretend to stand up for consumers and taxpayers, et cetera, and they're standing up to the powerful, and they're going to bring you change, and you should have hope. Now, that's a real problem for the Democrats because they take more money from lobbyists than even the Republicans do. So now how are they going to continue to get that lobbyist cash so they could overpower anybody in their local elections with the lobbyist cash that they raise and their opponents cannot raise since they're not in power? So how are they going to get that lobbyist money while pretending to do reform? Well, two things. One, all of a sudden, they're going to have this love of bipartisanship. And then when you look at that, the Republicans won't go along. Oh, you twist my arm. Oh, no, you won't go along. All right, let's water down the bill. All right, make the check payable to Senator Chris Dodd, right? So they use the Republicans as cover to do so-called compromises, to be centrists and moderates and get bipartisan deals. Now, have the American people in the last 10 years or so, 20 years, you can go back further, I'm sure there was a time when there was real bipartisanship, okay? In fact, a lot of people would point to 1978 as when it started to get much worse because of changes in financing of the Democratic Party, et cetera, okay? But that's another long story. So, but since then, has a bipartisan deal ever helped the American people? I mean, let's look at the recent past. So they strike bipartisan deals in the Senate for health care. What happened? Public option, gone. So you no longer have that option. It was supported by 60 to 80% of the American people in over a dozen polls. It's too bad for you, not supported by the lobbyists. So we have a moderate compromise for bipartisanship. And look at that. The thing that the people are in favor of is gone, and the private insurance companies are protected. Shocking. Medicare buy-in, gone. Would help the American people, would help the deficit. Conservatives claim to care about the deficit. Drug reimportation would save us $100 billion over the next 10 years. Gone. Bipartisanship. They kill it so that they can continue to take a big pharma money. The drug companies give more money than almost anyone else to the politicians, okay? And accordingly, also the fourth thing gone among many, many things is negotiating with drug companies. Now, of course the government should be able to negotiate with drug companies. No right-minded American would say no to that. I don't even think the R-word teabaggers would disagree with that. Then why wouldn't we want to negotiate with drug companies? Of course we would, right? Well, that's also gone. Why? Bipartisanship. They decided to make a deal, the Republicans and the Democrats, where shockingly enough, look at that, the corporate lobbyists won and you lost yet again. Funny how that bipartisanship works. And now, look, now we get to the media side of it. The media is pathetic. Instead of telling you what bipartisanship really is, which is a wholesale capitulation to corporate lobbyists, the American public have not won at all in any bipartisan conference. Look, I'm going to give you more examples. Finance. We're doing financial reform now. Chris Dodd, and that's why he's involved in this story, came out with really strong rules in the beginning in the Senate side and said, look, these are the financial reform we need. I came on the show and said, wow, fantastic, I'm in favor of it, right? And what happened since then? Say it with me. Bipartisan compromise. So all of a sudden, not as much financial reform. All of a sudden, we're not separating the banks, according to the latest negotiations in the Senate, of commercial banks and investment banks, which means that they can continue to gamble with your money. You know, are we going to cap leverage and capital requirements? Well, maybe, maybe not. Are we going to, you know, look at derivatives? As you look up and down the list, every single so-called compromise here to the Republicans has been to water down the bill, make it weaker, and make financial reform much less effective and much more in favor of the banks. Gee, I wonder how that happened. Well, yeah. So in between conservative and liberal, I guess in the middle is corporate. That's not the middle between conservative and liberal. It's a guise. So the Democrats love that they can be filibustered by the Republicans because it allows them to go, oh, the Republicans, oh, we need 60 votes. Okay, lobbyists, come on, I give in. Everything you want. And it's, oh, bipartisanship, we need bipartisanship. Where do I say, where do I get the check? Come on. Okay, that's the game that's being played. So, well, what's my beef with Senator Dodd's office? So I write this blog and I talk about Senator Dodd. As I mentioned on the show yesterday, there was a quote from a staffer of his in the Financial Times saying Senator Dodd, you know, is about to retire, and so above all else, he wants bipartisanship. In fact, they said it twice in the quote, which I translated to mean Senator Dodd is retiring. He'd like a really nice fat paycheck from the banks when he retires. So under the guise of bipartisanship, he will make this bill much, much weaker, which he's in the process of doing now. So Senator Dodd's office reaches out to me after the article goes up, and they say that it was grossly unfair of me because that was Financial Times quoting a staffer. It was not an official statement. And to be fair, in the article originally I said it was a statement from the office, and that was incorrect. So now, the attribution was wrong there, and so I fixed that. Is the substance right? Come on. So then they give me an official statement about, no, you don't understand. Senator Dodd is working so hard for the Volcker rule. That's the tough rule that Obama's now pushing, okay? And he's, you know, look at his statements. They sent me a statement of Senator Dodd saying he's strongly in favor of the Volcker rule. Oh, well, then that probably settles it. Look, save me your crocodile tears, okay? You want to prove to me Senator Dodd's in favor of strong reform? There's a pretty easy way to do it. He's the head of the committee. He could pass strong reform. And if he does, you win. I'll come on there. You know me. I'll come on there instantly and be like, Senator Dodd rocks. He kicks ass. I was so wrong to ever question him. I mean, he passed real reform. And he didn't cave into special interests and lobbyists under the guise of working with the Republicans. He didn't do that at all. My bad. Now, how many of you out there think that's what's going to happen? That ain't going to happen. You know what they're doing right now in the Finance Committee? Instead of using their advantage, the Democrats have more people than the Republicans, significantly more in the Senate, obviously, and hence they have more people in the Finance Committee. No, just like they did for health care reform, they have eliminated that advantage for themselves, and they're negotiating on an even basis. 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, broken up to groups of 5, one-on-one negotiations. Do you remember the Republicans giving up their advantage in the Senate and saying, no, even though we have more senators, we'll give you equal power? Do you remember that? I don't remember that, right? So why are they doing that? Why would anybody voluntarily do that? Because they want to use the Republicans as an excuse to make sure that they water down the bill in the ways that the banks want so that they can cash in later. That's the reality of American politics, and that's why
sometimes I feel discouraged.
One more thing. JR sent me a great article on these reform efforts. And all the Republicans, so one encouraging side of that, actually, is that Obama is now pushing for reform that is tougher than the current version in the Senate. So look at this. Okay? Hey, credit where credit is due. I can't wait to give people credit. I just never get an opportunity, right? So Obama's fighting for more reform. Great. And he is pushing for the Volcker rule. And for the moment being, it does not seem disingenuous, okay? He is putting some pressure on the Democratic senators, et cetera, okay? So that's positive news. So how did the Republicans react to that? They were, of course, outraged, livid, threatening, saying, oh, here, let me give you some quick quotes. Let's go to Senator Judd Gregg, who was supposed to be in the administration. He says that, I think it's confused the issue considerably, this Obama's new push for harder reform, because he's basically fanned the fires of populism. And in a lot of instances, populism doesn't give you either good regulatory activity or strong markets. It undermines both in many instances. I mean, the guy's pretty much telling you, I can't wait to screw over the little guy. I can't wait to do exactly what the bankers say, because that's the real correct regulatory practices. And I don't want to be blinded by what the people want. God forbid it's a democracy, right? So, and then there was Bob Corker, and I could quote you 8 other Republicans who all said the same thing. Screw the people. We want to protect the banks here, okay? Under the guise of this, tut. What President Obama is suggesting sounds awfully populist, like he's in favor of the little people. Oh, come on. Which, for the first time in a long time, made me think, hey, look at that. Obama's doing something good. All right, so what? But that's not the interesting part of the story. That's to be expected. What's the interesting part? The Democratic race. Almost every senator quoted, Senator Mark Warner, see if I have the other names here in front of me. I don't, okay? But Warner and some of the others. Bipartisanship. Of course! They said it 3 different times in the article. The Democrats looking forward to bipartisanship want to work with the Republicans, and they are worried that Obama's new tougher proposals endangers their bipartisan relationship with the Republicans and what they've been working on so far, and they're afraid that it might make reform harder, not easier. What it's making harder is them cashing the check from the lobbyist who said, look, I put your name on it, Mark Warner, and he's a Democrat from Virginia, but you can't cash it yet until you make sure that there's really no good reform, okay? One more thing. When I get worked up on this, you know, okay? So one more thing. One of Obama's proposals is to go after the bonuses, okay? So that has the CEOs livid. Now, normally they go through their PR people, they go through their lobbyists, etc. But this time, it's very specifically their ass on the line. They might not get to make $100 million a year in bonuses anymore. God forbid, maybe they would only take $20 or $50 million a year in bonuses. So the article explains that the CEOs, including Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan, flew down to Washington themselves, went door to door. They went and talked to all the senators on the Finance Committee. They talked to, are you sitting? They talked to Tim Geithner. He took their call. It's really weird. He brought him right in to consult with him. They talked to Ben Bernanke. These names keep on surprising me, right? And Dimon goes personally to him. You better not touch my bonus, otherwise I will fuck this economy up. Just like I did before. You've been warned. I guess he's saying, if you threaten my paycheck, I'll threaten your paycheck. And that's how our government got captured. Simon Johnson will tell you more about it a little later in the program. Young Turks. Back on the Young Turks. Now joining us, former chief economist at the International Monetary Fund, current professor at Sloan School of Management at MIT, one of the people that writes for the very well-regarded financial blog, The Baseline Scenario, and the author of 13 Bankers, Simon Johnson. Professor Johnson, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
All right. First, I want to talk about an article you wrote today saying that Tim Geithner might be on the ropes. What gives you an indication that that might be the case?
Well, a couple of good sources indicate that the White House is at least considering asking people who might make a good successor to Tim Geithner. Now, the time frame is not at all clear. I don't think they're trying to get rid of him right away. But the very fact that this subject is being brought up by the top people in the administration suggests that a move is going to happen sooner rather than later.
And who do you think would be a good replacement for him?
Well, my suggestion is actually a guy called Tom Hoenig, who's the president of the Kansas City Fed. He is very tough on the biggest banks. He's the only Fed official, or actually government official, in the United States who's come out really clearly and consistently against these so-called too-big-to-fail banks. And he has a very good track record in other dimensions, too. I think he's also a Republican, as far as anyone knows, and he would enjoy a lot of Democratic support as well. So he would be able to get confirmed in the Senate almost without question.
Is there any prayer that a Democrat could ever get confirmed? I mean, we do have a Democratic administration, right? I mean, it seems like we're like, pretty please, if we give you a Republican, can you consider it?
Well, look, I proposed Paul Krugman for chairman of the Fed. I actually was fairly strenuously opposed to Ben Bernanke getting a second term, and put some effort into advancing the cause of Paul Krugman as an alternative. Krugman, of course, is a brilliant economist, got a Nobel Prize, and he's written super stuff at both a technical level and a broader, more popular level for 2 decades on the issues really central to what the Fed works on. It was Krugman himself wrote a quick rebuttal to me on his blog, saying, no, I would never get confirmed in the Senate. So perhaps I've given up on Democrats in the light of what Paul Krugman said, and I'm going with Republicans, working for Democrats.
Now, for the Fed position, I suggested Joseph Stiglitz when Bernanke was in trouble, another Nobel Prize winner and a former chief economist at the World Bank. The second person I suggested was you. But since you guys are clearly for financial reform, it appears you have no chance.
Yeah, that is a definite strike against you right now in Washington. I do think our time will come. I mean, the time of reform is the time for people who seriously want to change the structure of the financial system and who think that too big to fail banks are too big to exist. But that tide has not yet turned. There's a lot of debate. The President Obama's endorsement of the so-called Volcker rule, while I'm not sure the substance is there yet, has tremendous symbolic value and has put a lot of people on the wrong foot and on the defensive, talking about the corporate lobbies and so on. So it's a step in the right direction, but there's a long way to go.
You know, it's funny because I thought we voted for a guy who was pushing change in 2008, and I thought we gave him 60 senators and a gigantic lead in the House to work with, but apparently that wasn't clear enough of a message, so we got to wait a little longer for change. Okay, so let's talk about what's happening today then, about the times today, because it appears to me that Obama has made some tougher proposals, and I want to know if I don't want to get excited for the wrong reasons. We've already gone through that a numerous number of times already in the Obama administration. Are the new proposals, whether it's the Volcker rule or the bonus tax, or even the tax in getting the offshore accounts of the corporations, et cetera, are those actually tougher, and are they enough coming from the Obama administration? They
are a little bit tougher, but they're not enough. That's my bottom line. The Volcker rules, for example, say they want to cap the size of the biggest banks going forward, not allow them to get any bigger. Well, that's fine, but why would you think that after 30 years of crazy, unregulated growth, a massive crisis, and the most generous bailout in human history, that you have the right size for banks? It doesn't make any sense, does it? So the banks, I think, have to get smaller, and the specific way they want to make them, they want to hive off some of their activities, take away so-called proprietary trading. That's okay, but that's a very small chip off the iceberg. The banks will barely notice that one. And interesting, actually, the stories out of Davos this week was that when they had sufficient beers or vodkas, the bankers themselves came up quite easily with ways they would circumvent these restrictions. And even that looks like it's going to get killed in the Senate. We have reports from numerous sources now saying Senator Dodd is negotiating with the Republicans in the spirit of bipartisanship to make sure we have no reform. So when you look at what the Senate is doing, is this the capture of the government that you were talking about? Well, the capture of the government is very broad. It's certainly across the executive branch and in much of Congress. I do think that, again, opinions will change. I do think the mainstream consensus is shifting on this issue. So positions that I was taking and I and my colleagues were advancing a year ago, which perhaps were controversial and seen as radical, by some other people at that point. Now we have a lot of people on board. Our book that you mentioned, 13 Bankers, has got endorsements from the left and from the right, from people in the financial sector and people who are independent thinkers about these issues. So I think increasingly people are realizing that this is a major problem that can be dealt with, needs to be dealt with, and I think the consensus will change. It's not going to change in the next 6 months. That's not what happens to consensuses like this. It'll change over the next 2, 3, 5 years, but I think it'll move in the right direction.
You're a little more hopeful than I am. We're talking to Simon Johnson, former chief economist for the IMF, professor at MIT now, and the author of 13 Bankers. I saw the rave reviews for the book, and it makes perfect sense. And what you write about is intellectually appealing. But to me, that's not the question. The question is, do the people in power give a damn about what's intellectually appealing or what the mainstream consensus is? Because right now, if you look at the American population, the mainstream consensus is stop giving in to the bankers. Yet here we have Democrats as well as Republicans looking to find ways, every conceivable way, to help the bankers.
Well, you're right about that, and of course it's money talking there. The lobbies have a lot of money, and they have a tremendous amount of influence. But I think I put it like this: if you campaign for office, saying I want to build somewhat dangerous nuclear power stations, but don't worry because it'll give you really cheap electricity, you wouldn't get elected on that basis. People would say that's crazy. Or if you said let's not have any regulation over drugs, over pharmaceuticals. Let's just go back to selling them on the street corner like we did 100 years ago. Again, you wouldn't get anywhere in the primary. And I think that's what has to happen, that's what will happen with regard to financial sector policy and attitudes towards the big banks. What is regarded as acceptable, sane, reasonable activity vis-a-vis these banks has to change, and change dramatically.
One of the things, Professor Johnson, that captured my interest about your writings in the beginning was when you talked about your experience at the International Monetary Fund, and how the United States now began to look like countries like Russia, et cetera, that were captured by an oligopoly. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, well, yes, absolutely. I've worked on crises and in difficult economic situations for 20, 25 years. And in many of these places, you have a form of oligarchy. So a small group of people who make a lot of money, one way or another. They have economic power, and they use that economic power to get themselves political power. It's a very old phenomenon, actually. Aristotle wrote about it a long time ago. And we've seen it many, many times in human history. And, of course, there's different versions of oligarchy. There's a President Suharto type of oligarchy, the kind they had in Indonesia, where it's very much about the man and his family. There's the Russian type of oligarchy, which, of course, is very much about, people who have access to coercive force and people who got their hands on oil and gas at critical moments in the recent past. And then there's the American form of oligarchy, which is not based on corruption or brute force, particularly, or perhaps at all, or even on buying favors, particularly. That's a mechanism they use. But mostly it operates through a form of intellectual capture and cultural persuasion, so that the banks, particularly the big banks, have convinced key policymakers and lots of mainstream people, even outside of Washington, that finance is good, unregulated finance is better, and completely unrestrained big finance is best.
I think the intellectual capture argument is very persuasive, especially as it regards to people like Ben Bernanke and Tim Geithner, who I think are, I impolitely say they are convenient tools of Wall Street. But when it comes to politicians and the Rahm Emanuels of the world, and Senator Dodd, and even President Obama, I don't think that they're that unsavvy. I think they see the macro picture, and the macro picture is, and this was the old way of doing things. I think things are changing now, as you say, but we get corporate money, lobbyist money. Republicans don't get it. We win elections. So there's a lot of that, too. I think that's old school, that not bribes, but political bribes, in a manner of speaking.
I'm sure you're right. I'm sure that there's a fair amount of that. It's ready money, and the Democrats have done well with it. But now they see the consequences, and the people I talk to on Capitol Hill, many people, mostly Democrats, feel extremely uncomfortable about the situation they've got themselves into, and feel that the sort of basis of policy towards the financial sector really has to change dramatically. It will take a while, but I think it will head in that direction.
let's talk a little bit about the book, 13 Bankers. First question that pops in everybody's head is, who are the 13 bankers? What does that mean?
Well, that we're not talking about. Sorry to be coy, but we're not giving that secret away until the book actually comes out. It's a book about the history of the financial sector in the United States, and it goes back to the beginning of the Republic, actually, and tries to put today's problems in a historical perspective. And I think it's very different from, but a nice, I think at least, a nice sort of contrast with Andrew Ross Sorkin's book, Too Big to Fail, because that was very much about the micro details of the crisis, who did what to whom and who got away with what kind of loot. Our book is trying to say, step back, look at this over 200 years, look at over the last 30 years, particularly since the Reagan Revolution, see how exactly did finance get so big and so powerful in this iteration, and how was a big, overly powerful financial sector dealt with in the past, in previous episodes of American history. And what lessons can we draw from that? And as you might guess, our view is too big to fail is too big to exist.
The Republicans will say, look, we have busts and booms in business for all of history. This is just absolutely normal. If anything, the problem was overregulation. Is there any shred of validity to that, or is that just a guise to cover up for the banks who have made a lot of money from this and contribute to the Republicans?
Most it's a cover-up, although, as you pointed out a moment ago, the banks also contribute to the Democrats. So it's a cover-up that works on both sides of the aisle. Essentially, it's deregulation. Now, when you deregulate and you have some very unregulated parts of the economy, parts of the financial sector, you get money moving in and out between the deregulated part and the somewhat more regulated part. And so where you see that kind of friction, you can say, aha, it's the regulation. If everything were completely deregulated, it would be fine. I think that position is ludicrous and absolutely not supported by the data.
The analogy I use, you used a couple of other analogies earlier, is I use a sports analogy. If we didn't have any refs in any of the games, my guess is that we would have a lot more fouls. And so the Republicans are basically asking for no refs. Now, I think that was, of course, part and parcel of why we had the collapse. But I want to get a sense from you, something that I still don't have as good a handle on as I think I should, which is the importance of the naked credit default swap. So the derivatives with no underlying assets, the casino gambling, if you will. Was that a small part of this, or was it a gigantic part of what caused the collapse?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that this Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission, headed by Phil Angelides, might actually get to the bottom of. My sense right now, based on what we've seen, is that it was a relatively small part. I mean, the part of the iceberg that sticks out of the water, a very sharp, pointy part that can do a lot of damage, but it's still only the tip of the iceberg. That really underneath it, and what really caused the damage was reckless risk-taking by banks that thought they could get away with it. And some of them did, of course, absolutely get away. They made lots of money in 2000, 2008, 2009, and I'm sure they'll do even better in 2010. So I think it's the attitudes, the failure of risk management, the excessive and arrogant behavior of the biggest banks, part of which comes through in their behavior in the credit default swap market. But I think that's just a manifestation of this deeper problem.
That's interesting. So the risk-taking leads to the problem, and obviously these derivatives are a large part of it, but so is the bigger problem then leverage? Because if we don't allow them to take that much risk with more money that they don't have, would that solve a great part of the problem?
Well, certainly if you require them to hold a lot more capital, which is the flip side of leverage,
right.
That would make a difference. And it used to be the case before the mid-1930s and before 1913, when the Federal Reserve was created, that American banks carried a lot more capital than they do today. Somewhere in the region of 20 to 40% capital to asset ratio was pretty typical if you go back to the late 19th century.
Wow.
Now, yes, exactly. Wow. And we're arguing quite strongly that as part of the changes that should be implemented, the capital requirements across the financial sector should be increased, not back to those 19th century levels, but at least into the 20 to 25% range. And you do that over a period of time, and of course that changes the nature of payoffs from finance. It doesn't make finance unproductive or unable to operate. Remember that venture capital is a very successful part of the American financial machinery, and that's equity-type financing. And the people who put their money into venture capital funds understand that the returns will vary according to how successful the underlying investments are, and this could be very successful or not successful at all. So more equity-type payoffs from financial structures based on higher share of equity, and of course more skin in the game for shareholders. So the shareholders in this scenario should watch much more carefully over the bank executives.
You know, I have 100 more questions for you, but we have only a minute left. We're talking to Simon Johnson, author of the upcoming book, 13 Bankers. So on that capital requirements, let me finish that thought. What's the chances that we get real legislation there? Are they working towards that? Is it realistic in the short term to be able to get the kind of capital requirements you're talking about, or what's the numbers they're pushing for?
The number they're pushing for is the number that Lehman Brothers had the day before it failed, about 11 or 12%. So they'll get that, but you have to ask at the end of the day, isn't that what Lehman Brothers had right before they failed? Okay. Which clearly didn't do them or us very much good.
All right, Simon Johnson, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, Young Turks. All right, back on TYT. Two members to thank here. Member number 1727, Stephen Watson, joined up on June 29th of 2009. And then member number 2088, more recent, Neil Friedman, joined up on September 14th of 2009. Neil, thank you. It's elementary, my Watson. Silly. Okay, in today's post-game show, which will be immediately following this fine program, for the members only, we will be talking about lib funerals, okay, how you can get buried in a green way, and we'll do the salad story, how there's shit all over your salad.
Yeah, that's pretty much the story.
Quite literally. Okay, but we'll break down the details for you so you can get grossed out and never eat salad again. Okay, let's move forward.
All right, we have a very disturbing video that features a 12-year-old bullfighter from Mexico. And he's in Colombia, he is competing in bullfighting, and he gets hurt.
He all right, he gets seriously hurt. So you're allowed to laugh at this, because I'm a bad man.
I can't believe you laughed at this.
Oh, come on, how do you not laugh at this? All right, let's watch the video.
12-year-old Michelito, a young Mexican matador, got more than he bargained for when he stepped into the bullfighting ring Sunday.
That's not funny.
Spectators watched in horror. A bull knocked him to the ground and then gored him before his father and other matadors rushed in to rescue him. A short time later, Michelito went back into the ring and the same thing happened again. This time his father was knocked to the ground and then gored as well. Still, Michelito finished the show. Afterward, he was taken to a hospital for an x-ray. Luckily, doctors found no major injuries.
Get out of there!
Ross Simpson, the Associated.
I can't believe that he got attacked twice.
And almost a third time.
Yeah, and he still went out there and continued competing, and then he went to the hospital.
All right,
Little Michelito.
All right, I want to clarify a couple of things here. First of all, when he got thrown the first time, I wasn't laughing. Okay, when I watched the first time, but then when he got thrown the second time, I was like, "Come on, Michelito, get out of there!" Okay, and then when he started running around the third time, he's like, "What's again? Why did I come back out here? This is such a bad idea." I'm like, "Get him out of there, man! Come on!" Okay, so that's why I was laughing, and I know already that he was fine. I read it before I saw the video, right? Now, having said that, I mean, I love that the bull got a little revenge. I love that every time he does it.
Right.
I mean, who did you notice the bull with like the 18 spears hanging out his back?
Yeah.
Who was crying for him, right? And but look, don't get me wrong. I don't like the bullfighting. I think it's ridiculous, etc. I'm glad the dad got thrown. Okay, but you got to give Michelito a lot of credit, man.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's
definitely.
a tough 12-year-old, man. You think that 12-year-old? Most 12-year-olds come out for a second beating after they get gored by a bull? That's one tough little kid, man. I mean, and if you're the dad, if you're the mom, you're like, you did what? You sent him out again? Do you know he's 12? Okay. Oh, that dad's going to be in a world of trouble when he gets home.
I'm sorry. That's the line that I go with, man. If you go out there and you get it the first time, I'm like, oh, man, that's kind of messed up. 12-year-old probably got talked into this. And you go back out there, that's when I start rooting for the bull to fuck you up worse. That's just all there is. I mean, the next time it's like, well, now it's your fault. You know, fool me once. You know, you keep going back out there. Now you're asking for it. You know it can happen. Maybe the first time you go, oh, it's never happened to me. I'm so good at this. I've never gotten hit before. You get it, man. You should stop. If people go and go, if you go up in the mountains and there's a sign that says danger, mountain lions are around here all times, and you say, let's set up tent right here. I'm gonna say, well, you deserve to get your ass eaten up then. Fine, do whatever. That's your choice. You know what you're eating yourself into.
When the bull starts trampling, I get like, I don't like that. That scares me, right? But when he flips him, let's be honest, it's a little funny. Okay, now here comes the second time.
There's an old saying in Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, fool me once, shame on you. If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
Cholito, you should have listened to Bush. Oh, when he drops that thing on the third time around and he starts booking it, that's my favorite part, man. He's like, fuck this, man. What was I doing listening to fucking Dad? Oh, no, yeah, go back out there again. All right. That was awesome. All right. Now,
Yes.
serious story about abstinence.
Yes, Rob Stein from the Washington Post has written an article about a study that has to do with abstinence-only education and how it might be a very effective form of sex education, right? Now, in the past, there have been no studies that indicate this, right? So conservatives are looking at this study and saying, yes, we got them, right? Abstinence-only education is effective, and we have a study that proves it. Except this study doesn't prove shit.
Oh, damn.
Okay? Now, let me tell you what the findings of the study were, okay? It says that only about a third of 6th and 7th graders who completed an abstinence-focused program started having sex within the next 2 years. Nearly half of the students who attended other classes, including ones that combined information about abstinence and contraception, became sexually active.
Okay.
Okay, so basically, those who took the abstinence-focused courses were less likely to engage in sex in the next 2 years, and those who took comprehensive sex education were more likely to engage in sex in the next 2 years. Now, the reason why this study doesn't prove anything is because the abstinence-focused education or curriculum wasn't really abstinence only. And what I mean by that is it was a very moderate form of sex education. First of all, what it did is it didn't give any moral standards. Yeah, moral standards when it came to having sex. Basically, the abstinence-focused curriculum said, you know, you don't have to wait till marriage to have sex. Just wait for the time that's right for you, right? Which is super moderate. That's not abstinence only. Come on. And also, the abstinence-only curriculum did not disparage condom use.
Right. And so it wasn't, first of all, let's get this clear. It wasn't abstinence only. I don't know why they keep calling it that. It was abstinence focused.
Right.
It talked about condoms. So if you're going to do safe sex discussion and then tell kids not to have sex until they're ready, yeah, I'm in. I think that's exactly right.
And that's pretty much...
So am I surprised that that worked? I don't question the numbers. I think the numbers are right. I think it's a legitimate study, right? Now, you could argue about some of the specifics, but overall, I think, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But when you listen to what was in the program, there was no moralizing, as Anna said. There was no. It didn't say wait till you're married. It said wait till you're ready, right? And it gave kids a little bit of maturity about how to handle sex, which is what I would do as a parent.
Right.
So if they came to me with an abstinence-only program for my kids in my school, and they lectured them about how you know it's dirty sex and condoms never work and you should wait till you're married, I'd say get out of here. That's nuts. I would never agree to that, right? But if they come and say, hey, you know, condoms work and you should only have sex when you're ready, I'm like, yeah, all right, where do I sign?
Right.
As a parent, that's what I would want. That makes sense.
And basically, this abstinence-focused education, the way they're labeling it, it's comprehensive sex ed, right? To a lesser extent, but it is. It's comprehensive sex ed. Don't have sex until you're ready for it, and when you do decide to have sex, make sure you protect yourself with condoms. That's comprehensive sex education.
I have another word for it, which is, of course! It's of course sex education. So, Tom, regulate for us. Did you have problems with the numbers, or do you have a different issue with it?
No, I had a couple of issues, one of which you touched on, which I'll get to and expand on a little bit. But the first one was I had an issue with the age of the kids that they used in the study, because they used 6th and 7th graders, and on average that means that the kids are 11 to 13 years old. Now, the thing to keep into account is they followed them, or they got back with them after 2 years. So you're talking about kids that are 13 to 14 or 15 years old, basically, like getting back to them and saying, okay, have you had sex? Did you use contraception? That sort of thing. Now, the thing is, if you look at a variety of sources, you'll see that in the U.S., the average age that someone loses their virginity is 16 years old. Okay?
Right.
So that would be
For
like
boys. I think for girls, it's 17 years old, and that's today. Back in the day, it used to be 19, right? But for younger people, it's now 16 and 17. So most kids haven't even lost their virginity by the time this study gets back to them.
Right. So an analogy that I would think of for this study, it would be like doing a study on how good a retirement plan works and following up with people when they turn 64. When the vast majority of people retire when they're 65. You know, a certain percentage of people, yeah, before
Right.
65.
But let me do a counterpoint on that, Tom. That's a very good point, very important point. And then we know that other studies show that eventually everybody has sex before they get married, right? Or almost everybody, right? So now, no matter what pledge or what program that they went through. Now, having said that, if this program, Tom, delays kids from having sex for a little while, and they have sex at 15 rather than 13, or 17 rather than 15, I think as a parent, I'm pretty happy with that. I call that a success. You see what I'm saying by that? I don't expect them to not have sex until they're 28. I'm hoping they can make it to 18.
Right. Well, I think the problem, and it's a well-made point. I think the issue with this is what a lot of people on the religious right and people who have an agenda that's tied to, religion or moral teachings are trying to make out of the study. Because if you look at the blogs today, if you look on the internet, they're going crazy. They're doing touchdown end zone dances, dancing in the streets. They're over the top about it. They're saying, oh, this is such a huge blow to so-called comprehensive sex education and all of this stuff. But
now that's a great point. Let me just jump in with it to buttress that, because one, they're going to absolutely twist this right away. They're going to call it abstinence only. They're going to say, you see that, Jesus saves, whatever, and they're going to go back to wasting a lot of money on garbage programs.
Right.
That's why we're a little scared. I don't mind the study itself. I'm scared about how it's going to get twisted, right? Because facts are facts, but unfortunately, not for the right wing. And my problem is the mainstream media is already helping them.
Right.
By Washington Post, right in the title, abstinence-only programs might work, study says. That's not what the study said.
That's true. Look, and the reason why this is a problem is because the Obama administration has decided to cut out all funding for abstinence-only education. Okay, Obama has finally done something right, and he said, I am not going to fund any type of sex ed curriculum unless there are studies proving that the curriculum is effective, right? Now, conservatives can come to Obama and they can come to the administration and say, look at this study. Abstinence-focused education works, but they'll twist it. They'll twist it in a way that sounds like abstinence-only education works. And then our money, our tax dollars, are going to go toward these ineffective programs.
Now, having said that, their initial reaction of the Department of Education was, well, if this study worked, then we would be interested in doing this kind of, we might do funding behind this, which is reasonable. And if you call that a compromise, hey, between complete comprehensive sex education and abstinence only, and the compromise is abstinent focused, and you have a study showing it works, well, that's the kind of compromise I could live with. That makes sense to me, as long as they don't go to that extra step that the conservatives want them to.
So yeah, it's really important to point out that a lot of previous research, for example, in the journal Pediatrics, are fairly recent, within the last year or two, I want to say, study on abstinence pledges, where people say they pledge, I'm not going to have sex until I get married, was a disaster. That the people involved in that, the kids, didn't wait any longer to have sex, and when they ultimately did have sex, they were much less likely to use birth control, which obviously can lead to unintended pregnancy, and that can lead to abortion, which nobody wants, especially the religious right, but nobody wants that. Even pro-choice people obviously don't want that. So my biggest fear, just to reiterate what you guys were saying, is they're going to take, disproven forms of abstinence, basically real abstinence only, that has the moralistic tone, that has the wait until marriage, that has another factor is a lot of times they have misinformation on contraceptives. Like they spread lies about STDs or about the ability of condoms to stop STDs or pregnancy. That's another thing. And so that's a totally different type of program than what was discussed here. And that's critical for the media to explain that very clearly.
And of course they won't. So that's where the problem's going to lie. Okay. But that's why we're here, straighten shit out. You know that? All right. Now I'm going to add 2 more stories to the post game. I want to do the dirty banker who got caught with the pictures. Okay.
We like dirty. It'll be fun.
Right. And we like to bust bankers, so it's perfect. And then I'm going to put the Warlock in there.
Okay.
Warlock in the post-game show for members only. We'll see you there. Sign up for membership on theyoungturks.com and get the whole 3-hour show plus an uncensored post-game.